It's going to be a case-by-case basis for the Florida Panthers on what to do with their upcoming UFAs and how to treat one of their prize prospects in their organization.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, March 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the nation's #1 sports podcasting network, and it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Today, we are going to discuss some of the upcoming UFAs for the Florida Panthers that we are discussing. That one piece of business is likely to be done this week as far as a contract extension, and then one of them that may get punted during the summer. And then we're going to discuss about how one of the Panthers prospects has continued to strive despite being sent down, and also what the very thing that has helped the Panthers, stay in the playoff race during the latter part of December and early parts of January that actually might end up hurting them later on in the not, I wouldn't say pursuit, but possible pursuit of a top 10 lottery pick. So we are going to discuss a little bit in this first segment of just about how about the press conference that Bill Zito had after the trade deadline, which it's a little strange where the team is on the road and then the general manager is not traveling with the team. And obviously when it's the trade deadline and you have a chance to discuss with your local media where most of them, if it's not the team media, they are not traveling to these away games. It's not like what it used to with these big newspapers that pay for the travel for them to be there. So Bill Zito stayed put in South Florida, discussed with the local media just about his approach to the deadline. And you know what? The biggest question and that was asked to Bill Zito was just about how when it comes to times where you're tested and you really when you really look at the experience that this Florida Panthers team has gone through with winning it all and then just being down, and now with this specific season with the injuries that have gone on with this Florida Panthers team, you kind of get a test of the character in the room for this group, but also the fact you get a sense of a character from the general manager in this case, because he's been on both sides of everything when it comes to negotiating these contracts for players and then getting that opportunity to be on the other side where, because you have been through it before, you kind of get an idea of like, okay, what is fair for the player and what would I do in that position if I were back in it. So that has truly helped there. And this was asked from Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press to Bill Zito on just how about how it's helped him throughout his career, about how he sees these players whenever they are getting phone calls regarding their possible availability at the trade deadline. Here is what Bill Zito had to say.
Well, I think it helps me. I'm not sure. Might be self-serving, but I would certainly approach so many of the situations and reflect upon, okay, remember, players are people, agents are people, everybody's doing their jobs. And I think that helps. I think it might make me a better person some days, maybe a worse person other days, but I reflect on it a lot. And it's important. It's important that you understand that, look, we all can see things through different prisms, and it doesn't make us good or bad, just different, and it's understandable.
And it's crazy because it's so easy for us outside of the organization and fans to look at player performances and just say, hey, just trade them. But we forget sometimes that the bond that's also been created, and the fact that sometimes when one thing breaks, as far as the amount of injuries that they've had with forwards your best defensive forward in Alexander Barkov that actually helps the defense, and the fact that your best player when it comes to two-way defense and Seth Jones have been out for 2 months now. You kind of see how that could really truly affect one's performance in the goaltending, and then trying to get the offense to have it to make up for it, which thankfully Sam Bennett has stepped up. Matthew Tkachuk recently got a hat trick in Detroit this past weekend. So again, you kind of wonder what happens if the scoring that they could outscore their issues when it comes to goaltending, of how much points that they could actually make up. But again, that is not the identity of the Florida Panthers as far as a team that could win most of these low scoring games, as they've proven, especially in 2024, where all their games that they clinched the championship, their playoff series, right before the championship, were all games that they allowed only one goal to get to the back of their net. And again, what matters is how you treat players, not only when you're in the organization, but how you treat them on the way out of the organization as well. Where who's getting a lot of bad PR this whole trade deadline? St. Louis. And it's mostly because of one trade that wasn't made, with Colton Parayko agreeing, not him agreeing, but the franchise of the Blues agreeing to a deal to send him to the Buffalo Sabres during the deadline, and it's pending player approval. That got leaked, and then there were multiple reports right before the official decision of him not waiving his no trade clause that would keep him in St. Louis. So now he's still there, and that now there's an uncomfortable feeling inside the room there. I know AJ Greer and Sergei Bobrovsky didn't have any they didn't have no move clauses in their contracts, but still, whenever you just win, and then you're and then that feeling of shipping them off a year after, sometimes that just might not sit right in a room. And that's really what matters about how you treat people in your organization there. But I did get a text on how the Panthers are expected to take care of business this week as far as an extension. So don't know when this is going to be announced, but I was told that sometime this week there could be an announcement on an extension of AJ Greer, and that there is going to likely be a multi-year deal on the table there for AJ Greer. And I think it's very smart business for Bill Zito to do this, because based on his role being a fourth line checking player, it's not going to break the bank. I wouldn't expect them to make more than $1.25 million on his next deal, and I expect it to be maybe around a 2-year deal. It's still a significant raise for AJ Greer. It's fair to the Panthers organization. It doesn't destroy their books coming into next season if the cap is projected to be 104. So that is a great deal for AJ Greer and Bill Zito, and the fact that he's shown that he could fill in on a middle six role if necessary there. But here's the thing about where the Panthers would stand if that extension is finalized, and they get this done before the end of the regular season, is what you have in your organization come next year, because that would mean, if you include Sandis Vilmanis here, because he just got sent down to the AHL, that would mean 14 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 0 goalies signed. But that doesn't mean that the forward depth is done for how it's constructed, because Mackie Samoskevich is going to be an RFA, and you still don't have your 4C signed in 2026, 27. So all of those 14 forwards, again, if the AJ Greer deal is signed, that none of them are 4C guys. So I know, yes, Roboquist can shift from wing to center occasionally, but is that the guy you want to fill for that role guaranteed? I know Cole Schwint has been an outstanding story. Fortunately, 2 major injuries for him, one of them colliding with Sergei Bobrovsky in the Vegas game, and then him out for multiple months, and then this most recent injury that's likely ending his season. Can you bank on him to stay healthy? I know Thomas Nosek, him coming in for the Leafs series, and then that line of him, Gadjevich, and Greer not giving up a single goal at 5-on-5 until the final, can you expect Tomas Nosek to play at that level that he was as he was? And some great scoring chances that he had in Detroit just most recently there, especially in the first period, where the Panthers were really starting to get their game going despite being outshot, and also the fact that they really was taking away the Detroit Red Wings speed. So I thought that Nosek looked absolutely fine. So and the fact that Nosek took a little bit of a haircut this offseason just because he wanted to stay with the team, taking the league minimum at $775, which here's the thing. The minimum salary next season is expected to be $850K. So that also means that what you would get in cap relief for players that you put on waivers is also going to be a little higher as well. It's going to be the minimum salary plus $375K of what you're going to get in relief. Right this year, it's 1.15. So in the case that you have to place Jesper Bokus on waivers come training camp or make a trade there to relieve the cap, if you place him on waivers, you'll get just only north of a quarter, 25K, excuse me. That will be a relief. It's around 27, around there for the Florida Panthers if nobody claims him. But chances are that's going to be a piece for the Panthers that's going to be shipped off in order to bring in a 4C like Tomas Nosek or someone else from the organization in a form of a trade or free agent signing, because most of those depth players for the Panthers that they're going to be looking for are going to be to fill the edges there. And you never know who's going to be available there with that. But also Alan Walsh tweeted that the cap is going to be around 123 million by 2028-29 there. So it's going to be 104 next year, likely going to be 113 in 2027-28, and then 29, 123. So you're looking at somewhere around $10 million rise each year for the next 3. So by the time Alexander Barkov gets to the second to last year in his contract, he's going to be accounted for 8.1% of the cap, which is outstanding when you look at those numbers. And that open up space is going to help younger players to get in the mix for the next transition of this Florida Panthers team. And I know I spoke about how things aren't looking great in St. Louis post-Cup about trading guys. It could be a little uncomfortable for the Panthers getting to 29 and before 2030 when most of the players still have no move clauses and they still got to shed. Thankfully, this rise of 9 to 10 million likely wouldn't put the Panthers in that same category as the St. Louis Blues. You never know based on performance drop-offs and everything after that. So we will see of how the Panthers manage that. But a little bit of business that's going to be taken care of, expected, but still got to look elsewhere for at least a 4C option, because there's a lot of wingers, but not a lot of centers there for the Florida Panthers team. But coming up in segment number 2, we are going to discuss Sergei Bobrovsky. My goodness, has he been outstanding in his last 2 starts? And could this be a sign of a possible bounce back for the rest of the regular season, and maybe even continuing as the Panthers are hoping to re-sign him? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Quo. Spring is a natural reset point, and if there's one thing that could quietly cost businesses money, it's messy communication. Missed calls, sky texts, no clear thread of who says what. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo. QUO, the smarter way to run your business communication. Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 views, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, It lets your entire team share one business number, so you never miss a call, text, or opportunity. And make this season no opportunity, no customer slips away. Try Quo free and get 20% off of your first 6 months at quo.com/LockedOnNHL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNHL. Quo, no missed calls, no miss customers. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, March 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. And so, again, we talk about case-by-case approach, and we talk about how AJ Greer is going to be likely the first one taken care of for the Florida Panthers here. And the one who's actually going to be possibly held back until the summer, Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, you talk about these last 2 games for Bobrovsky where he was not the problem against the New Jersey Devils in his last game before the deadline, back on Tuesday for the Panthers there. And the fact that he came back into the lineup, all the noise about trade deadline starting on the second end of a back-to-back as opposed to the first, just the way he was just reading the plays as well, where being able to stop after a stretch pass for Emmett Finney, another one where Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad were very committed to the strong side on Sergei Bobrovsky's right, and then able to get to the top of the crease and then make stops. Multiple reads off of deflections as well, where especially after the Panthers took the 2-1 lead, where it was the Detroit Red Wings crashing the net, where he had that little X marks the spot on as he was laying on his back, and then using the blocker to at least get the puck outside of the goal line there. Just a little bit of a stressful period for the Panthers as they were trying to hold on to a lead. But you kind of saw how the Panthers, once they have a lead, they have gone back to their identity of just being that shutdown, not needing to overwhelm the period in the final stretch without controlling the play, and also laying off a little bit of their forecheck and allowing the play to come to them in the neutral zone. And we've seen that so many times throughout the years there. And also the fact that the Panthers were continuously getting sticks in not only in passing lanes, but also using long reaches in order to break up plays, as I saw so many times on the evening that guys like Patrick Kane were unaware of where the Florida Panthers were multiple times on the night, where he was skating on his own, and then the Panthers were right there to pickpocket him and take the plays away and eliminate his speed. As I mean, one of probably the greatest American hockey player of all time in Patrick Kane, and the Panthers have made him look a little bit silly at times on the evening. But you got to give credit to Florida, just the fact that at points they were still in their own end, and also getting a lot of giving up a lot of shots. But I feel like it was a lot of those empty calorie shots that they gave up to the Detroit Red Wings. And the fact, hey, look, the only goal that they gave up on the evening was a 5-on-3 with both major parts of your penalty kill in Anton Lundell and Gustav Forsling were in the box. If the Panthers did kill off that penalty, even better. But it's not an expectation of me whenever you see those guys in that the Panthers are going to come off unscathed there. But still, going into the third period tied, and also the fact that you had a whole bunch of time on your hands to think about what you're going to do going into the third period, with so much time left on the power play, where you get just 35 seconds, into that third period, where it was a nice disruption on a clear from Brad Marchand, and then Matthew Tkachuk redirects Brad Marchand's shot into the goal. But also the fact that they got their goals off of great forechecks like Carter Verhaeghe. And, that there's a mistake by the Detroit Red Wings on not having the support behind the net in the corner, where Carter Verhaeghe was already ahead as his momentum was carrying him to the end boards. And then off puck, Matthew Tkachuk right there in the low slot, ends up getting the first one for the Panthers there. And then a great interception from Gustav Forsling that allowed Matthew Tkachuk to get that empty net goal cross ice. And it was a long distance shot from there. But also Nico Mikkola being the guy to activate into the play, where once that puck is off his stick, the fact that he has the the big legs and the long strides allows him to get in front of everybody, and the underrated speed that a lot of casual hockey fans might not see in Nico Mikkola, we see it all the time here, as he was the guy getting ahead, and also the fact that he was ahead of the play right before the Panthers exited their own blue line. There was so much time and processing for the Florida Panthers forwards to at least be back, so that it doesn't affect their the counterattack from Detroit there. So that was another great thing for the Florida Panthers. But with Sergei Bobrovsky and the amount of stops that he made on the evening in the previous game in New Jersey, you're looking at this past game against Detroit, you're thinking hopefully this is the start of a big bounce back for Sergei Bobrovsky. And I can't tell you what the terms are going to be looking like for Sergei Bobrovsky. I'd be guessing if I just threw him out there, but you're thinking possibly somewhere between 2 years, 3 years max there. So 2 years minimum for Sergei Bobrovsky. And the fact that the team is getting in a better spot as regarding health, with the anticipation still is that Seth Jones does return to this mix for the Panthers. You're thinking just consistently about needing to finish strong for this Panthers team. And Sergei Bobrovsky is just, at least in these last 2 games, has actually been a big part of that. And you know what? This team once again has a lot of pride on them, on just wanting to just play for each other there. And you got to be impressed that it's like, okay, you get one good game, but then you know that it could flip just like that for Sergei Bobrovsky there in the next one, because you just never know what you're going to get out of him. But you know what? These last 2 games where it was a lot of anxiousness, anxiety going into the trade deadline, and now the fact that this team can play a lot freer truly helps as far as not needing to overthink things, and the whole group of just not needing to overdo it is like, okay, when it comes to possibly making a stretch pass that could be intercepted, and then if the opponent resets in time for to gain the zone, are you going to be set enough? So that is also a factor for the pre and post deadline, that the Panthers can just focus on playing hockey and being themselves. And you know what? They say all the time, even through their series over the years, that even going into a Game 7 against Toronto, they said that they never felt nervous. When they would blow that 3-0 lead against the Edmonton Oilers in Game 4, when Stuart Skinner got pulled for Calvin Pickard, and they came back after that, the Panthers didn't even panic there. I didn't even panic there, because we knew that Chris Knobloch used every single roster move that he's made as far as switching up his lineup, while Paul Maurice did not at all. So we were even confident then. So, and I'm just trying to once again see what they're seeing as much as I can, and also seeing kind of the chess wars that coaches put. At least that's what the playoff experience from seeing this team do there, and try to apply as much as I can in the regular season, even though you don't see the opponents on consecutive nights. But you could see that the Panthers are coming back to a little bit of their form as far as getting their chances on the forecheck, and also just being those bullies that they've been over the year when it comes to those post whistle stuff. And by the way, if you missed it, was that Buffalo Sabres Tampa Bay Lightning game kind of spicy as far as post whistle stuff, with Brandon Hagel going after Rasmus Dahlin, and he got fined after that for being an aggressor there. And I wonder how Tampa Bay Lightning fans are going to be trying to twist that in their favor, saying, the X person is a goon for this, yada yada yada. I don't want to hear any of that excuse from them. So it's not just the Florida Panthers. If you are a team that is a contender, and you bring that pack mentality that the Florida Panthers have, it's going to be reflected across the NHL, because people want to impersonate what winners do. So gotta love seeing that Florida Panthers effect all throughout the National Hockey League as well. So we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss a Panthers prospect that has been sent down, and him continuing to play well despite being sent down. And the very thing that has helped the Florida Panthers keep themselves in the race throughout December and January might actually be the thing that hurts them in the long run when it comes to their draft lottery odds. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And there's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part isn't always so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. I pulled up the Game Time app, and I picked a certain NBA game and had tickets locked in within minutes. Love seeing the all-in prices, no surprise fees up front, and zone deals stood out. I chose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and I saved money. Great last-minute ticket options, too, with tickets showing up at solid prices. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Segment number 3 here on this Monday, March 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And although there weren't any Panther games on Saturday and Sunday, the Charlotte Checkers were actually back in action as they wrapped up a 10-game road trip in Lehigh Valley. And it's crazy that they went 6-2-2 in that stretch. And Sandis Vilmanis, in his first game back, by the way, gets 2 goals on the evening, including a game winner on a quick rush. Robert Mastro Simone got the steal, a little bit of a rush, and then Sandis Vilmanis pots in the overtime winner. And the Charlotte Checkers actually blew a 4-goal lead going into the third period, and they found a way to still get the win, as they're kind of stuck in third place right now in the Atlantic. They're too many points away from second and a lot of points away from fourth. So they're kind of looks like they're going to be locked into the number 3 spot in the Atlantic Division in the AHL there. But listen, Sandis Vilmanis got to be happy that he's going to get some playoff games, and a lot of people are confused once again on why Vilmanis was sent down. It just comes down to needing to be on the AHL roster at the deadline to be eligible. And with the unlikelihood that the Florida Panthers are going to be making the playoffs, this is great for the spring chicken that is Sandis Vilmanis and getting some playoff games there, by the way. Right now, the Panthers have also recalled Luke Cunnin. They actually called him up on Saturday. He did get 1 game with the Charlotte Checkers, and he actually got 2 assists in his 1 game there. So right now, the Panthers are operating at 15 forwards, 6 defensemen for their roster at the moment. So as right now, they have 23 players right now. The max that, well, not the max, the pre-deadline max. You can exceed that as long as you're cap compliant. So lots of forwards, just 1 injury away from needing to bring either activate Seth Jones or actually call up another defenseman based on any other moves that they might have to make, because there's still a few cap moves that they'd have to make for Seth Jones. But Panthers were as low as 7th coming into the weekend for their top 10 lottery odds. Right now, they're 10th after they got a win and a few other teams lost over the weekend. And the top 10 pick lottery watch for the Florida Panthers coming into Monday, March 9th, is Los Angeles Kings at Columbus Blue Jackets. And it's crazy. The Columbus Blue Jackets have been in a few games where it has affected the Panthers' lottery odds. Their own game against Florida, and now this game against the LA Kings here, where if the LA Kings get a single point on the afternoon, this game is actually a 4 p.m. start. It was actually a reschedule of a game back on January 26th when there was snowstorms going around the U.S. and some of the games had to be moved around, and this was one of them actually. So they'll be on the Kings will be on a back-to-back tonight in Columbus, and then they'll be going to Boston. So this scenario for LA, 1 single point, and the Panthers will be right back outside of the top 10 in points percentage. They'll be at 11th, if anything. So the Kings could win a game of any kind, shootout or overtime, and the Panthers will remain in the top 10 going into Tuesday. But we spoke about the very thing that helped the Panthers be in the playoff run around December, January. Is like, oh, the Panthers just need to win X many games, and they'll own multiple tiebreakers over these amount of teams. It's crazy because the Panthers, despite being in the top 10 in lottery odds at the moment, they have the 9th most regulation wins. Crazy to think how you're either finding a way to win, or you're pulling the extra attacker in the last minute and 2 goals are being in the back of the net, which hurts your goal differential for what it's worth. And the fact that, again, that whole stat of record in 1-goal games can be a little misleading, but the fact that there's still signs of a team that is still ready to compete in 26, 27, and hopefully beyond that. But the very thing that has helped the Panthers could end up hurting them, because compared to the rest of the field, as far as top 10 lottery odds, they have more regulation wins than a lot of these groups. And if they end up being tied against the LA Kings, the LA Kings would actually jump the Florida Panthers in lottery odds there. So that is also something to monitor. So looking at all the teams who are even behind the Panthers as far as odds, New Jersey is right now at the 11th spot, and they have 21 regulation wins. The Florida Panthers have 29. Like I said, a single point will have the Panthers, will have the Kings jump ahead of the Panthers in odds for points percentages. Theirs will go a little lower. Both of them are at 516, but LA has a game in hand. So that difference of 8 regulation wins, and you're not going to, LA is not all of a sudden going to make that up for the rest of the season, because the Panthers are also going to win some of their games in regulation as well. So you could count that out as a possible tie, and the Panthers will be behind them, ahead of them in the actual standings, but behind them in the lottery odds. So got to be careful how I phrase that sentence. But Toronto has 19, Nashville has 21 with regulation wins. Winnipeg is still kind of in reach to pass the Panthers as far as lottery odds, but we'll see how much offense they could actually get and get some support for Connor Hellebuyck, as they've won 3 straight. But Washington, that's another team who's outside of the playoff picture, but has a lot of regulation wins as well. That was actually a big opponent that we were looking at for the Florida Panthers in the beginning of this season, of teams that they're chasing. Oh, you got to win X specific game, because that's one of the teams that you're tied with. And now both teams have fallen off, as John Carlson got traded to the Ducks as a big move. And it's funny because the management group of Washington was asked, do you see yourself signing John Carlson back during the offseason? Great. Brian McClellan said he's now on another team, so I can't talk about him. It's like, because that's tampering. So yeah, just heartbreaking where you want to talk about certain teams, things from a guy who used to be on your team but is now no longer there. But again, that's the thing that could hurt the Panthers as far as the lottery odds. But at the same time, for this group, they are going to continue to try to win games from here on out. And we'll see if the health could actually keep up for what we are seeing with guys returning, and also the Florida Panthers playing back to what we're used to seeing for Florida Panthers hockey. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thank you, as always, for listening to today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're going to be back after Tuesday's home game against the Detroit Red Wings and recap that and more on the next episode. But thank you guys, as always, for listening. And in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, Please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.